The other day I recorded an episode of Top 5 about the off-season questions facing the Yankees. And one of the obvious omissions was Gary Sanchez. And Gary Sanchez was, prior to last season, one of the main off-season questions for me. But nothing happened with Gary Sanchez. The Yankees seem to like Gary Sanchez, and it seems as if they're intent on fixing Gary Sanchez. We've heard Michael Kay talk about it a lot on the broadcast and on his radio show. Gary Sanchez has gone to a one-knee approach behind the plate because they want him to be better at framing. But that's made him even worse at blocking bad pitches, especially pitches that are high and require him to get up on his feet, as you sometimes see with Aroldis Chapman. You saw it with Clay Holmes the other day, and he's a sinker baller, so that was kind of odd for him. But Gary Sanchez continues to just perplex me. Every year you think this guy might break out. You see his bat, and you see what kind of power he has, 22 home runs. For a catcher, that's not bad. Although we've seen some other catchers put up huge numbers, Salvi Perez. I saw someone in the comments say the Yankees should trade for Salvador Perez. That's just not going to happen. Nobody's going to give you a great catcher. It's just nobody's in the business of helping the Yankees. And that's one of the reasons that the Yankees seem devoted to fixing Gary Sanchez. They brought in Taylor Swanson, who is a catching coach. And, maybe Gary is a little bit better this year. He's definitely gotten better at framing. But I just don't see a ton of improvement. Offensively, he hasn't been that spectacular either. He's batting .211, which is not great, but it's better than the .147 he hit last year. And if you don't care about batting average, let's talk about OPS. 2 years ago in 2019, he had an .841 OPS, or on-base plus slugging. He was an all-star. I know what you're thinking. That was a juiced ball year. He did have 34 home runs, but he was 19% better than league average as a offensive player, and he had a positive defensive WAR, or D-WAR, of 0.7. The last 2 years, his D-WAR has been negative. 2018 was obviously a mess. He had a positive D-WAR, but his offense was terrible. He had an 89 OPS plus, so he was 11% worse than league average. He hit 186 with 18 home runs. You have to go back to 2017 before you really see a guy who was living up to his potential. He was just 24 years old. He hit 33 home runs. He had a positive D-WAR, a positive O-WAR. His overall WAR was 4.0. He was an all-star. He was an MVP candidate, finished 22nd in the voting, and he was a Silver Slugger winner. Now, we talked a second ago about how nobody's going to help the Yankees out by giving them a great catcher, trading them a great catcher. I mean, sure, you'd love to have Salvador Perez. You'd love to have Narvaez from the Brewers, but these things are just not realistic. The Yankees' best chance, and this is why they've been drafting this way, is to develop a new catcher. Now, a couple of years ago, they drafted Anthony Siegler, but he's had a bad year down there in high A. He's batting just .219 with 4 home runs and 24 ribbies. He's a switch hitter, but he just has not shown enough pop with the bat. I don't think he's going to make it. That looks like a bad draft pick at this point. And then you look at Austin Wells, who was drafted last year. He's just 22 years old. He had an okay season at high A. He's batting .264 with 16 home runs, 76 ribbies. One thing that stands out to me is that he swiped 16 bags and has not been caught. So where does that leave Gary Sanchez? I think the Yankees might just try and fix him. Kyle Higashioka has shown me a lot this year. I think he could be an everyday catcher. Be interesting to see if the Yankees make that move. But it'll be also interesting to see what happens to Gary Sanchez if the Yankees don't bring him back. Which team gives him a shot? Behind the dish or possibly as a DH? I do think he would likely hit a lot better if he was only focused on hitting and didn't have to worry about being behind the dish. Plus, he would take less foul tips off of his bare hands. So in summary, I'm not completely convinced that Gary Sanchez is gone this winter, although fans seem to think so, and the fact that he's been benched a little bit more lately certainly doesn't help his case, but he was also benched at the end of last season. So, we'll see how it works out, but I am not confident that the Yankees are going to move on from Gary Sanchez. I think a lot of people were skeptical, myself included, that we would see Luis Severino this season at all. Especially after that groin injury that he had about halfway through the season when he was coming back from Tommy John surgery. You might remember that he was really good for the Yankees in 2017 and 2018. In 2017, he finished third in the Cy Young voting. He was an all-star. He was 14-6 with a 2.98 ERA in 31 starts, 193 in a third innings, 230 strikeouts, gave up just 21 home runs. So he was essentially what Garrett Cole has been this season. Garrett Cole has a 3.02 ERA. That's how good Luis Severino was. He was your ace. And he was only 23 years old, so it looked like he was going to be ace for a long time. 2018, he has another good year. He goes 19-8 with a 3.39 ERA in 32 starts. Throws his first career shutout. 191 and a third innings, 220 strikeouts. All-star once again. Finishes 9th in the Cy Young Award voting. 2019, though, he ends up having some shoulder soreness. And it was kind of mysterious. And then he injured himself rehabbing. He had some trap issues. He had some scapula issues. Ends up missing almost the entire season. He pitches in 3 games towards the end of the year, all starts. Goes 12 innings, allows just 2 earned runs. Keeps the ball in the ballpark, no home runs allowed. 6 walks, 17 strikeouts. So 12.8 strikeouts per 9 in his limited outing. However, in 2020, as he prepared for the season, he felt a bit of tightness in his forearm, and that is typically the precursor to Tommy John surgery. Ends up missing all of 2020. Now, we almost didn't have a 2020 season because of the coronavirus, but, it would have been helpful to have Luis Severino for the playoffs. But, hey, look, Tommy John surgery happens. Nobody is immune from that. But you figured 2021, as he rehabbed, that he would be back maybe June, maybe July, on the far end of things, maybe early August. But he had some groin issues, then he had some mysterious shoulder soreness, and now he's coming back as a bullpen piece. I'm really excited to see what he has. I want to see that 100-mile-an-hour fastball, but part of me just doubts we'll see it. I think he'll probably top out 95, 96, might see some 97s, just because of the layoff. How sharp will his breaking ball be? He might have some adrenaline. You might see some really good stuff. It's a shame we're not getting to see him as a starter, though, because he really was quite a good starter. I don't know if he's ever going to be a starter again, and I'll talk about this when we get to the final segment, the 2022 rotation. You do have some good starters lined up, but Severino has, because of his own injury issues, kind of put himself out of a guaranteed spot for that rotation. If he comes back and dominates in the bullpen over the next couple of weeks, the Yankees might be tempted to move him to the bullpen permanently to take some pressure off of his body, off of his arm. And maybe not even permanently. We've seen some guys go back and forth. We saw John Smoltz came up as a starter. He ended up in the bullpen, ended up going back as a starter. Dennis Eckersley came up as a starter. He excelled in the bullpen. Sometimes that happens. Injuries can derail starting pitchers, and it's a lot easier to throw 50 to 60 innings out of the bullpen than it is to throw 200 innings out of the starting rotation. So it'll be interesting to see how Severino works out next year, but I can't wait to see what he has in 2021. Rightfully so, I think we were all kind of tough on Giancarlo Stanton coming into this season. I mean, the guy had a lot of trouble staying on the field in 2019 and 2020. He appeared in just 41 games across 2 seasons and hit just 7 home runs and had just 24 RBIs. That's not very good for a guy who's making basically $20+ million from the Yankees. But this year he stepped up. He's proven that he could play the outfield, and in his age 31 season, I think he's performed better than a lot of guys do in their age 31 season. He's hitting .269. He's got 30 home runs. He's got 81 ribbies. He's got the highest exit velocity average of his career. He's got an .847 OPS. He's got a .131 OPS plus. And he's looked good in the outfield. But most importantly, he's played in 128 games. Now there's 11 games left. He's probably going to play in 136, 137, maybe 138 games. That's pretty solid. He might get 1 or 2 days off going down the stretch, which I think I would just play him every single day. I mean, what do you have to lose? If he gets injured, it is what it is. You got to put your best bats in there going forward. But I think we all should recognize that this guy has worked hard. He's bounced back. And when he plays a significant amount of games in a season, he's going to put up numbers. 30-plus home runs. His WAR is not incredible. It's just 2.5. But I think a lot of that goes towards his defense. He's got a 0.9 D-WAR so far. He's looked good to me out there. He's passed the eye test, but the defensive metrics, which I don't always trust the defensive metrics. They're kind of new. They're kind of, I don't want to say arbitrary, but I don't think it's a settled science how you measure somebody's defense. I just don't. And I'm sure somebody in the comments will come back and tell me why they should be considered accurate. But I look at the guy defensively, and he's looked solid. He's looked comfortable. He positions himself well. He doesn't run that well anymore, but he's got a great arm out there. And he's been very clutch. I mean, he's picked up a number of big hits for the Yankees this year. He's got more than one walk-off this year. I think he's done a nice job, and I think we all should give a nice round of applause to how Giancarlo Stanton has bounced back. I still don't think that the Yankees could move him, but if they do decide to tear it down, it might not be a bad idea to approach him, because now you could probably get something for him with the DH coming to the National League. You can't tell me that the Dodgers or the Padres, somebody wouldn't want Giancarlo Stanton in their lineup. The guy can hit, and he can fill in the outfield. I don't think he's ever going to play 150 games in the outfield again. But if he can give you 80 games in the outfield and give you 135 to 145 games overall with his bat in the lineup, that's a plus. That's a value to a team. So nice, solid season from Giancarlo. He's done much better than I thought he would. One thing that's interesting is the double numbers are way down. He had 34 doubles in his first season with the Yankees in 2018, just 16 doubles this year. So when he connects, it tends to leave the ballpark or he tends to stop on first base. No triples since 2018, just 1 triple since 2016. So he is not fleet of foot. When the Yankees traded for Anthony Rizzo a couple of days before the trade deadline, you figured that Luke Voit was going to be dealt. He was on the injured list. It seemed like the Yankees were making a shift to prioritize defense and left-handed hitting at first base. That's still true. That's why Luke Voit's not getting a ton of playing time. But he's played pretty well in 101 at-bats since August 8th, since coming back. He's got 8 home runs. He's got 24 ribbies. He's got a 248 batting average, a 339 on-base percentage, and an 864 OPS over that time. Overall for the season so far, he's got 11 home runs, 35 ribbies in just 209 at-bats. I mean, those numbers are solid. A 778 OPS. That's ticked up, obviously, since he's come back. When he first came around this year, remember he started the year on the injured list. He came back right during the spider tack, I guess, high point. You remember he hit that big home run in Texas, a monster shot. That was on, I want to say, May 17th. And then he really didn't do much after that. And then he went on the injured list again on May 25th, my birthday. Didn't come back until June 22nd. And then on July 11th, he went on the injured list again and didn't come back until August 8th. So he's had a season that's been a lot of inconsistent playing time. And of course, his numbers are not great. But since coming back on August 8th, I mentioned they're pretty good. I mean, 8 home runs in just 101 at-bats. That's like a 40-plus home run pace. It'll be interesting to see if the Yankees decide to hang on to Luke Voit. I think he would be the perfect DH for the Yankees next year, but since you do have Giancarlo Stanton and you don't think he's going to play 150 games in the outfield, I think it's more likely that Giancarlo will be your primary DH, and he will trade off time with Aaron Judge in right field. That was the original plan when the Yankees traded for Giancarlo. The thought was to keep both of those guys healthy and keep their bats in the lineup. You could move Luke Voit back to first base. I mean, you don't have a first baseman other than him under contract for next year, but I don't think they like his defense. And I also think that he's much more likely to get hurt if he's playing every day at first base. He's had a lot of injuries since coming to the Yankees. I think he would do great in a place like Colorado. You know, let him go DH in Colorado and he'll put up 50 home runs. There was some talk that he could be dealt for Trevor Story at the deadline. Obviously, the Rockies decided to hang on to Trevor Story. I don't know if that was a deal that was actually proposed or not officially, but I think that would have been a solid move, especially given how tough shortstop has been for the Yankees this year. Gleyber Torres struggling. You know, you had Vasquez up for a little bit. You've played Tyler Wade there, but you really haven't had that stud shortstop that you need to win a World Series. I think that Urshela's done a nice job at shortstop, but back to Luke Voit. I just don't know what his future is going to be with the Yankees. It seems that they continue to sit him, even though he's been one of the Yankees' more productive hitters over the last month and a half. It makes you wonder if there's something going on behind the scenes that we just don't know about. Maybe he's got some kind of a nagging injury still that he's playing through, and they're just trying to keep him healthy. He seems like a great clubhouse guy. He seems like he gets along with the team. He's a leader. He obviously works hard. I mean, look how big and strong the guy is. Bat looks like a toothpick in his hands. He's busting out of his jersey. I mean, this guy looks like a Yankee. And he hits like a Yankee. I mean, 8 home runs in his last 101 at-bats. What else could you ask for? Especially at a time when your offense has been terrible. And you continue to sit him. I just find it perplexing. And final topic for today. The Yankees have underperformed this season for sure, but I don't think it's the pitching that's been the problem. They rank 3rd in ERA. They rank 2nd in strikeouts. They rank 3rd in fewest hits allowed, and a lot of guys have stepped up in the bullpen. Jonathan Loaizaga, Lucas Litke, Michael King. Talked about that last night. Clay Holmes was a good pickup. Joely Rodriguez has a 2.3 ERA as a Yankee. Steven Ridings is just 25 years old and is a monster waiting to eat the American League next year, in my opinion. The rotation has been overworked, but solid. They lack win totals outside of Garrett Cole, mostly due to lack of run support, in my opinion. Garrett Cole didn't have his best performance last time out, but he's carried a lot of the load this season, and I don't blame him for being a tiny bit worn out. Nestor Cortez also had a bit of a hiccup last night, but I think given as well as he's pitched this year as a starter, sub-3 ERA, being just 26 years old, you have to consider him as a lock for the rotation next year. Jameson Taillon has defied my expectations with how often he's taken the ball in 2021. I think it's safe to say that the changes he made to his mechanics in the 2020-2021 offseason have been effective in keeping his arm healthy. And working with Matt Blake and Garrett Cole has made his pitches more effective. Jordan Montgomery has had a very representative year so far, much like his rookie season. 3.63 ERA in 27 starts. I don't think fans give him enough credit. He's had a better year than Taillon and Herman and Kluber. 144 innings, 149 strikeouts. He takes the ball. Just 16 home runs allowed. Keeps the ball in the ballpark. Domingo Herman was good before he wore down, which we anticipated might happen because it happened in the past and then he had a season off. I still think he might fit better into the bullpen next season and become an elite reliever because he's got 3 strikeout pitches and he's got pretty good control and easy mechanics. Kluber has been okay at times, but I think he's unlikely to return next year given his age and injury history. You mentioned Severino. I've been impressed by Luis Severino. I think he's going to have an impactful season next year. He's made 6 starts. He's got a 3.07 ERA. The walks have been an issue for him. 19 free passes in 29 and third innings. That's too many. But he also has 38 strikeouts, and he's arrived a year ahead of schedule out of necessity. So I feel good about the pitching next year. Now, if we could just figure out how to score runs off of bad pitchers, might have something brewing.